Over to you, Aishwarya.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to another meeting of Book Club for Toastmasters, where we learn about books, and it's mainly for self-learning. And this was born out of a love for books by Toastmasters. So even though we started with having Toastmasters on board, a lot of them are Toastmasters. We don't necessarily subscribe to having just Toastmasters in a book club. And though it was established in 2017, we started our first book, like a monthly book of the club in July 2020. So let me just tell you how we select the books. So members recommend certain books, what they would like to read, what's next on their wish list. And there's a group of curators who select what books we can read, and we actually curate as to what books we think everyone should be reading about, and then we select a few books of the month. So we started in July 2020 with Tuesdays with Maury, a short book, and it was reviewed by certain people, and then we continued, and since then the cycle has been going on.
Tuesdays with Maury.
It's not going ahead.
What happened?
It's just not going ahead.
क्या हुआ?
This is the second one. The forward arrow isn't working.
This is technology at its best, you know.
Yeah.
We are planning to put a man on Mars, but perhaps we need to fix PowerPoint at the same time.
Yeah, I hope this will work. Yes. And then we went on to very exciting books to end the year 2020, a very significant year. And we learned about atomic habits and how to win friends and influence people. And finally, we read the last book, Ikigai. We also have a few upcoming books. In January, we are starting with Why, starting the year, and then Man's Search for Meaning. And then finally doing something along the lines of psychology and finance. We have a lot of things in store in the future for our book club, and we're still figuring out how to best, cater to everyone, be it meeting in person once this COVID is all over, or be it doing something more virtually as everyone's comfortable. So if you have any suggestions, comments, or questions, do let us know. Santosh is right here on this meeting. You can PM him at any given moment and he'll be ready to discuss, even at the middle of the night, I think, anything about the book club.
I sometimes feel that there's not one, but there's two copies of Santosh. One who monitors the daytime, one who monitors the night.
And one was with his family. I
know
how he manages
right.
everything.
Okay, so here is our today's. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here is our today's book review, Ikigai, and it was a wonderful book to end the year with and to start the year with. And I'm really looking forward for an Harold's review. First time I heard Harold, I saw him was directly on the Toastmasters stage when he was actually contesting, and that was a very funny speech that he made, humorous speech. I think this photo is also from the same event. And after that, then I wasn't introduced with the Harold, but I was knowing him. Then he joined the book club. We started talking, and then he floated an writing challenge. And I was a part of that writing challenge, and I could work closely with Harold, and I could came to know about his multiple sides. So though he is from technical background, he has a really good understanding of writing. He is an award-winning writer, award-winning speaker. He guides people about writing, particularly technical writing, non-fiction writing. He has an excellent blog. You should visit his blog. And he runs a meditation club also, free of charge, weekly once, I think.
Yes.
and he's a multifaceted personality. And when we floated this book Ikigai, he's immediately said that he want to do the review. So I realized that probably it's his Ikigai to talk about Ikigai. And I also read this book recently, and I was so jabbed with the this is small but such an quality book that I'm planning to read it again this month. So let's look forward and see forward that what Harold has stored in us. I saw the first slide of his presentation, and I could see that we are not only for a good book review, but probably also some visual visual nice treat also. That was really nice first slide. Okay, Harold, over to you.
Thanks, Santosh, for that beautiful introduction. So what you saw was the second slide, and the the first slide was this. I heard this word Ikigai, and I'm like, which Ikigai are they talking about here? This is the first time I heard this word in a conversation among somebody who was talking about the book. And of course, then I understood that it is not about a guy who is Iki. It's about Ikigai, this particular book, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life, written by two guys, Hector Garcia and Francisco Miralles, both of whom are published authors, and this is actually become an international bestseller now. So let's dive straight away into Ikigai. So as I said, these are the two authors, Hector and Francis. And the interesting part is the rationale on the basis of which they began. So the fact is that both of them have had some connection with Japan. I think Hector has been staying in Japan for a while, as has Francisc, and they happen to be discussing after their various careers. They happen to be discussing this unique phenomenon about the blue zones, which is called. There are zones in the world. There are 5 different zones in the world where the life expectancy is way above the average life expectancy of the rest of the world. And you can see in this graph, basically there is some kind of you can see the track. The red line here shows the average life expectancy of somebody living in Okinawa. I'll come to what is Okinawa. Okinawa is now a part of Japan. It's a set of islands, that are connected to the Japanese island set. But there is a slightly different culture, and I will talk about that in a little bit. But the rationale here was that why is it that these folks live for so long? Why is the average life expectancy over 80? And why does Okinawa, by the way, which is what it is today, have the maximum number of people in the world living over 100 years? So that began a search, and that's when they began collaborating, and they said, okay, this is something we need to write about, which is when they encountered the term Ikigai. So we'll come to what is Ikigai, but I'm sure on the left out here I put this diagram, which is what is Ikigai. So from the diagram itself, something very beautiful is shown here. Basically, this is the back cover of the book, by the way, and I'm a huge fan of reading physical books. And for me personally, just a moment, my video has gone off, I think. So for me personally, it always makes sense to read a physical book. Your mileage might vary. So I took a photograph of it, and this is what is there at the back, the back cover. And you can see that as a concept, we'll come to what is the formal definition, but as a concept, Ikigai is at the intersection of your passion, your profession, your mission, and your vocation. And this diagram has now become world famous. I'm sure that you all have kind of encountered or had a chance at least to take a look at this diagram. So before I proceed, in the chat window, if you can type out how many of you have read or not read. You can just type out whether you've read the book or not read the book. That way I can get a sense of, because if you have read, of course, if you've not read, then you'll learn something here, hopefully, and you'll be motivated to read. But if you've read, then I'll be asking for some of you to share some of your experiences, and it's fine. I mean, it's okay, great. So I can see at least the kind of the 80, yeah, it's great. Even if you heard the audiobook and then bought, that is awesome. That's Sneha, you've taken it twice, through different faculties. Probably the learning is even more there. Yeah, awesome, great. So I think 80-20 rule applies here. 80% seem to have read it. So we'll try to make more of a discussion at the end of it rather than just me going on and on. Thank you. Thanks for this. Yeah. So as I was saying that this started at this place called Okinawa, and which is why I felt that yes, Adanand, I got that. You've read a different book, and it would be interesting for us to take a look at what in what way that book is different. Because to be honest, I haven't read How to Ikigai, so that will be a good, like a 360-degree perspective as well. So I just wanted to say that Okinawa is a set of islands in Japan, which actually was separate from the Japanese kingdom itself, and it was called the Kingdom of Ryukyu, which lasted for almost 450 years until 1879 when it became a part of Japan. So it is also the birthplace of karate. So there are multiple martial arts which come from Okinawa, and of course karate is probably the most famous. The other side of the equation is that almost 1.5 lakh civilians, which is 1/4 of the population. The population of Okinawa is around 6 lakh people, were killed in World War II, and Hiroshima, killed almost 80,000 of those. So they were almost in that blast zone of Hiroshima, and therefore they faced a massive loss of life and disruption as well. So that makes it even more wondrous in the sense that how is it then, and this is what the question that Hector and Francis were asking, how is it that from such a devastating state in the 1945, how have they bounced back to a level where we've got so many centenarians and so many folks living beyond 80, 90 and 100. So as I said, they've got the highest per capita centenarians who are alive as compared to any other country. One interesting fact is that they don't have railway, they have no railway trains. So either you travel by car or, more importantly, you travel by cycle, which is what the Okinawans do. It's not a very large place. So it's just, I think, less than 100 square kilometers of area. But you can see it's a very, very beautiful place, a set of islands with blue-green water. If I had a chance, I would move to Okinawa. Okay, great. So that's about the rationale. So let's come back to what is Ikigai itself. So Ikigai is a Japanese concept that can roughly translate into a reason for being, your reason for living, or your calling on this planet, why you exist. And very beautiful word, as I said. And the book, although the book circles around all the related concepts, all the concepts related to Ikigai, it's not a preachy book. It doesn't tell you that, oh no, this is what you need to do for XYZ. It presents a fair bit of evidence and it makes some recommendations, but those arguments are very beautifully portrayed as comments made by the centenarian, the folks who so you almost feel like you're hearing from the horse's mouth, what they feel about the secret to longevity at some level. And there are many, many beautiful stories that are there. It starts by a discussion around something called logotherapy, and this is the next, if I'm not mistaken, next month. So February's book of the month. So I felt it right to talk here. So the book starts with a discussion around logotherapy. So just to give a very short introduction, Viktor Frankl was in the Nazi concentration camps, and he saw that the folks who could survive those insanely harsh conditions were those who truly had a reason to live. Those who felt that their life had some meaning for which they were willing to hold on and wait for the nightmare of the concentration camp to end. And after his concentration camp, in fact, he went through some horrendous experiences. And I'm not going to disclose all those secrets. You must read the book. But what he founded the philosophy of what is called logotherapy. And how does logotherapy differ with your traditional therapy? I'll talk about that a little bit. But logotherapy says the tenets or the philosophy behind logotherapy is that life has meaning under all circumstances, even the most miserable ones. And the beauty of this statement is that it's coming from a person who has probably lived in among the most miserable circumstances that and survived among the most miserable circumstances that one can talk about. So it's from practical experience, not theoretical, not theory. He also says that our main motivation for living is our will to find meaning in life. So life has meaning, and our motivation for living comes from our desire or our will to find meaning in life. For me, this was among the most powerful sentences, the most powerful statement that one could take from logotherapy. And then the third thing he said was, we have the freedom to find meaning in what we do. And I'll talk about a little bit about that by telling you a couple of stories that they discuss in the book. So they talk about a story of an American diplomat, where the American diplomat has been going to a normal or a regular psychotherapist for many years. And he keeps telling that psychotherapist that my life has no meaning. I am a diplomat, but this diplomacy makes no sense to me. And that therapist, the person who is his own therapist, tells him that you need to resolve your issues with your father, and they go down the whole Freudian pathway again. I don't want to get into the details of that, but the pathway of traditional therapy. And he has been doing this for many years. And then he goes to, can we mute? Sorry, there's some audio happening here. So the pathway of traditional therapy. But when he finally goes to Viktor Frankl, Frankl tells him the reason you're unhappy and the reason you're miserable is because you're saying it yourself, that you want to change your profession. And Viktor Frankl has this interaction with him. And after 5 years, thereafter no more interactions. After 5 years, this diplomat calls him and says, I'm really happy with my life. I changed my profession. He made the changes in his life that were meaningful to him. And then he became at peace. He came to peace by making the changes that he required. So logotherapy was offering something that is related to the meaning of our lives. And everyone who's worked, I'm sure, has faced this question: why am I doing this? Why am I like those who are software developers? This used to happen to me a lot. Like, why am I writing this code, or why am I managing this project? What's the meaning of my life? Why is it important for me to be doing what I'm doing right now? And everybody feels this at some time or other. And what Viktor Frankl is saying, and what the book in Ikigai has kind of picked from here, is you need to pay attention to that. You need to understand that your life has meaning and needs to be meaningful. So you can ignore the life meaning only at your peril. So I've just captured that in a nutshell. Second, he talks about something called Morita therapy. Now, Morita is another guy, Shoma Morita, who presented these findings again at the time of the war. So the fact is that Morita therapy was a way for people who had faced some extreme situations to come back to a normal, relatively normal life. So Morita therapy was created to deal with these anxiety-based disorders. So anybody, basically, if you're familiar, that anybody who has been through a life-threatening situation faces something called post-traumatic stress disorder. So after the trauma has happened, they are continuously anxious and they are unable to deal with that anxiety. And the goal of Morita therapy was to deal with those anxieties. And the philosophy behind the therapy is, one needs to accept one's life as it is at this moment. These are the principles. The principle is, accept your feelings, be present, and face whatever suffering you are having. So our traditional behavior patterns tell us to run away from our feelings, right? If you think about it, at some level, all the modes of operation, that is, taking some form of excessive, like addiction to alcohol or drugs, drug abuse or addiction to all different kinds of behaviors that in the long run turn out to be detrimental. Even food or diet can be a kind of when it is based on your emotions, it can be a kind of addiction. And all of these are a means of escape. And what Morita therapy is saying is that the only way through this anxiety is through acceptance and facing. So facing the suffering and acceptance, and then discovering one's life purpose. So it's a 4-stage therapy, four very simple stages. The first stage is the person is just put in a room for 4 to 7 days, where they are told to lie down and relax until a time comes when they feel ready to move to the next stage. So, the person is spending time with himself or herself. Then after a few days, they feel, okay, now I have relaxed enough, or they start getting edgy about not doing anything. So at that time, they have moved into something called light occupational therapy. So they're given some simple tasks like, okay, either you clean your room, you do some physical work, you chop vegetables, or you do some farming in the garden, or do some gardening, but some light physical activity. And third stage is you're completely engaged in that physical activity. Again, you're not talking to anybody. And finally, you come to the stage where you are interacting with you are like the fourth week, so to speak. You're brought back into society where you talk to people, and then you're trying in the 3 weeks where you've had the time to, while your body is working, your mind is also working, but working on trying to figure out, why am I alive? What's the meaning of my life? And then you discover, in effect. So they don't tell you anything. They don't say, this is what you need to do, or nothing is presented. It is for the patient himself or herself to arrive at this discovery of their life's purpose. So again, the similarity between logotherapy and Morita therapy is this. The goal is discover your life's purpose, and which is one of the major tenets of Ikigai when it comes to it. And the third book that is dealt with here, in fact, as I said, it is almost like reading 3 books in one. At least 1/3 of the book is dedicated to these 3 books. The third is a book called Flow by this very interesting character. I think he's almost like the father of flow now. And if you want to know how to pronounce his name, it's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So, when I first read the name, I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. So I went and I checked out, and it's Mihai. So I'm sure he was high on flow, and I'll tell you why flow is so important here. So, as I said, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is almost like the father, and his work is referenced in so many different fields of optimal performance, of therapy, of life meaning. For something that is very, very clearly defined here, he defines a state called flow, and we've all experienced it, right? Being completely involved and engaged in an activity for its own sake. And I don't think he's talking about watching a movie, although I guess people can get into flow while watching a movie as well. But, you've all kind of hopefully encountered this thing where you're doing something. Either you're reading a book, or you're working on a piece of software, or maybe you're making a meal. It happened to me once when I was cooking food, and I'm barely a cook. I can only cook to save my life. But I remember that I had hit flow when I was cutting vegetables, and I've written a blog post on that. So what exactly is flow? I'm sure you've all experienced it. As I mentioned, as I write it here, it's something that you might recall having been in the state of flow. But what is flow, and what are the factors that involve getting into flow? And why is flow connected with Ikigai? So the authors argue that flow is one of the major aspects of finding the meaning in your life, in the sense that you have to find the meaning in the here and now. And flow talks about the meaning, actualized meaning, meaning that the meaning that is implemented, practical meaning, is when you experience flow. And what is flow then? yes, it is being completely involved in an activity, but there are some characteristics. First of all, the activity has to have the right level of challenge, whatever it is you're doing. Like for me, the reason I say cooking is because, as I said, I can just cook to save my life. So when I was cooking that dish, whatever dish it must have been just at the right level of challenge. It was challenging enough for it to be interesting, but not so challenging. Like I was not making a biryani or some really complex dish which I didn't know how to make. So it was at just outside the boundaries of my capability. So he says to get into flow, the first thing is your task has to be at the right level of challenge. Second, there needs to be a clear objective. So in that, again, in my case, when I was making the dish, the objective was very clear. Cook this dish. Third, and here's the interesting one, doing one task at a time. And this is a huge problem for all of us, right? We are so used to now, getting like the phone gives you a buzz or somebody calls you or your laptop pings or there's something on TV. And there's this continuous state of distraction. And distraction is anathema to flow, meaning that if you are distracted, you cannot get into the state of flow. There are certain other concepts. He says takumi, which is artisanship, that is craftsmanship for its, like getting into a craft for its own sake. Like you're building it, there's no reward or there's no thought, at least at that moment, for what the reward is. The activity is itself the reward. And this is really beautiful. And I've experienced again this thing, and I'm sure you've all experienced it at some time or other when you're doing something and this the sheer joy of doing that activity is itself the reward. Any external reward is like a bonus. We are not even thinking about that reward. Couple of other things he mentions. The book mentions here, talking about sophisticated simplicity. That is a form of Zen. So simplicity, but simplicity taking into account complexity. So just to give you an example, and they don't go into it in detail, but they mention Steve Jobs and here's, my addition would be looking at something like an iPhone or a beautiful user interface from a software perspective, which is minimalistic, gets the job done. So that is a true epitome of sophisticated simplicity, meaning that simplicity is not easy. To actually make something simple is really hard work, and that seems to be a huge facet of the flow, meaning that you can achieve this sophisticated simplicity only when you're in flow at some level. The book also talks about micro flow, which is doing mundane tasks. So getting a glass of water, you can either do in a distracted state or you can do it in a state of flow. And the book recommends that you make your life a continuous state of flow by treating even your mundane activities as something worthy of attention and worthy of doing in the state of flow. And that he calls microflow. And of course, there's a discussion around rituals in meditation. I'm not going to go into the details of that. It's way beyond the amount of time that we can take to deal with this. Okay, great. So as I said, almost more than one third of the Ikigai book is the treatment of these three different concepts. And the other half talks about longevity at some level. Like what is the secret for long life? And I've kind of tried to summarize or condense it here. They present what are the secrets for aging, anti-aging. What are the ways in which one can prevent aging or mitigate or limit aging. Then they discuss some words of wisdom from the folks who are the longest living people in the world. There are some lessons from centenarians, folks who have lived past 100. And there's some very beautiful anecdotes and stories as well about a party that the authors go to, where the kid in the room is 84 years old, And not only that, they play a game, the authors compete in a game and they're beaten badly and they're disappointed because folks who are 84 plus defeated them at that game. It was quite funny. I laughed out really loud when I read that story. They also talk about diet and the philosophy, the Japanese or the Okinawan philosophy of eating only 80% of the capacity of your stomach. So you have to be a little hungry when you finish your meal. They talk about movement, and movement in the sense of not that they don't talk about aerobics. Apparently, the principle of movement is that the movements must be easy and regular. So sitting for the whole day and doing 1 hour of aggressive aerobics is much poorer than doing easy movements throughout the day, moving throughout the day, being in motion throughout the day. And he says that all these 100 plus or 80 plus year old folks, they're continuously moving. They're working all the time, literally. There is no concept of retirement there. So people don't retire from work, so to speak, like the Western concept. We have, oh, at 60, I'm retired. So there's no concept of retirement. And there are some interesting stories around that as well, about what happens when folks don't retire. Now, here's another very, very beautiful, there are a couple of beautiful concepts. They talk about resilience and anti-fragility. Anti-fragile is a term that was introduced by Nicholas Nassim Taleb in a book with that title. So basically, anti-fragile concept is, I'll give an example. There are systems which are fragile, like a bowl. Once you smash it, it's very difficult to put it together. So that's a fragile system. But you have other systems, like take the bones in my hand. You know, the bone is anti-fragile. If someone fractures a bone, Mother Nature puts those two joints back together so beautifully and in such a strong way that if ever that same hand is fractured, it will never be at the point where it was earlier fractured. So that fracture, when it heals properly, is much stronger than the rest of the bone. And that is the concept that Nassim Taleb talks about, which is anti-fragile. And he uses the term anti-fragility for this concept. And this book talks about it in quite great detail. It also talks about the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which is accepting transience and imperfection. Now, this bowl, you can see the picture of this bowl, right? So the Japanese have a philosophy that if a bowl breaks, we don't throw it away. They repair it, and they repair it by using gold to fix the cracks. You can see in this is an old philosophy. This is a 16th century Japanese bowl where all these cracks you see have been filled in with gold. And according to them, the cracked bowl which is fixed like this is far more valuable than an apparently perfect uncracked bowl. And that is a beautiful philosophy, a beautiful concept. The first time I encountered it, my jaw dropped. I was like, wow, this needs to be made standard reading at every school, college, every university. This, except we are told, we are told to improve, we are told to become perfect. Very, very few give the message that it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to accept yourself as you are. And by the way, this is a nation as a whole which reached those insane heights of productivity. So somebody might say that, oh, if you accept yourself, you will just lie down in bed and do nothing. But the Japanese actually shook the entire world with their quality and their productivity. One small nation with no metals, no raw material. They were importing all the raw materials. I think in the 80s and 90s, everybody was running scared of the Japanese juggernaut when it came to manufacturing. There's a beautiful story about that. Apparently, there was a Japanese outfit which received a manufacturing contract to manufacture some device, and the Americans who had given them the Japanese the contract, they said, we accept one defective part per one defective piece per 500 or so. And after 1 month, the shipment arrives. There is one big, huge shipment parcel, and there's a small parcel. And the Americans are confused. They're like, we asked for just one shipment. Why have you sent two? They call up the Japanese. And the Japanese said, yeah, but you guys said, no, you want one defective piece per 500. So we've manufactured those defective pieces separately for you. We didn't know why you wanted defective pieces, but here they are. So I'm saying that acceptance of imperfection does not mean that one will not be productive. Finally, there is a talk about being social, which is, being, what should I say? Being social matters. It makes a difference to one's life. In fact, being social probably provides as much protection to your heart, to your stress, to your physical well-being as a lot of the other factors put together. And these Okinawans are a massively social people. And the book goes into a great detail about how they're social and what are the different ways in which they're social. Finally, here there is a small chart about, about the diet that they have, right? So you can see the breakup, like 85% carbs, about 9% protein. For those who are crazy about that, 6% fat, 1785 calories per day, mostly plant-based. And you can see, take a look at the 96% vegan, 98% vegetarian, less than 1% eat fish, and so on. So you can get a sense of what the diet is like. And again, as I said, it's way beyond the scope of our presentation to go into any more detail than this. 16 plus hours outside home. Yes, Sujata, I know that. And that maybe that's, it may, I cannot talk from personal experience, but I wonder whether it is because that they're in a state of flow, whether they get into this movement where they're paying continuous attention to that. That's something that definitely can be discussed. So for my penultimate slide, I'm going to take a look at some of the characters that they mentioned. So some of the stories here, that they mentioned in the book, and some of the other aspects. I'll just take 5 more minutes before we get into a discussion mode, if you'll have me. There's a short story about how Steve Jobs goes to Kyoto just to meet this artisan Shakunaga, who's a ceramic, who makes ceramic. He makes cutlery, crockery and plates and spoons and cups and so on. And he goes and buys the ceramic stuff from this guy, and actually gives him and he says, I want you to make something different for me. So they describe how Shakunaga makes 150 different items as an experiment, and out of that he picks some 15 or 20 and sends it to Steve Jobs. They had a close friendship for many years. So you can see how the philosophy of these of the Japanese influenced Steve Jobs indirectly in his making of the the iPhone and the iPad and so on. And you can begin to visualize that, and I think that's an awesome addition. When it comes to the whole accepting transience, they talk about the Greek philosophers, Zeno, who was a Stoic philosopher. They talk about the Buddha and the middle path, and they also talk about two other Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. And specifically about Seneca, Seneca was also a cynic, was also Stoic. They mentioned something very interesting. They say that Seneca practiced something called negative visualization. So we've heard this term positive visualization, positive visualization. I was curious, what is this negative visualization that they're talking about? Apparently, Seneca was obviously a senator and a very rich guy. What he would do is once a week, he would send all his servants away and he would live his life as if he had no help, no servants. And once a week, again, he would do away with all the luxuries so that he lived for that one day, he would practice Spartan living. And he would visualize, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? And then he would visualize how he would prepare for that. For me, that was an eye-opener. And then he said that once you do this once you visualize the worst thing in your life happening to you, nothing can shake you. For being brought up on so much of positive psychology, positive only visualize what is positive. This is a very different take on the negative visualization or the negative aspects, right? And this was, by the way, Seneca is more than 2000 years ago. Finally, there's a beautiful story about, and there are many other stories which, as I said, there's no time, but there's a story about this guy, Miyazaki, who's a film director in a place called Studio Ghibli, and he's supposed to retire, and so they do a party for him. He's a very famous director of animated films and all that. So they do a party for him and they, give him whatever, the gold watch, this and that, and they send him off. And next morning, when they open the office, they find he's back at his desk and he's working. And everybody's confused now. What do we do with this guy? He continued to work at the studio till the last day of his life. So he did not have the concept of retirement, because he's saying, if you love something, then why would you stop doing that? Therefore, you have to do what you love and you learn to love what you do. And then there is no concept of retirement. Again, for me, a massive takeaway. Finally, there was a lot. There's a discussion around yoga. There are some techniques. They actually show some how to do the Surya Namaskar. There is some stuff on Tai Chi, something called Radio Taiso, which is a form of aerobics, not aerobics per se, but physical movement, stretching and all that, which was being done in Japan in the 50s. They used to actually announce these exercises over radio, and people would gather in the gardens and in the streets and practice. And the practice of shiatsu, which is a kind of flexing massage, Japanese massage, which again, you really need to read about. They talk about breathing techniques. They talk about the philosophies of Zen, Shinto. Shinto is a Japanese religion, which is called the pathway of the gods, or pathway to God. Meditation. They talk about green tea. They talk about the concept of no retirement, as I just mentioned. And they also talk about this diet, the specific diet they have, which is primarily fish and seaweed and these special fruits, which have got, like this shikuwasa is a citrus fruit that has got 40 times the antioxidants of an orange, a normal orange that we eat of the same size. And they say that this has a huge impact on the health, physical health of the Okinawans specifically, and of the Japanese as well. So at this point, I've kind of tried to share the book, not perhaps linearly, because there's, in my opinion, way too much to be shared. But I would like some of you who have read the book to tell me, like, what is the one thing that stuck out for you? Like, what made an impact for you? You can just, in a couple of sentences, if you will, you can unmute yourself and just say something about what struck you in the book. I think Aishwarya, let's have you, since you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, Harold, I think the diet part really, stuck out to me because of, I think even in our Ayurveda, we have a lot of, hello, can you hear me?
Anyone would like to go here?
Sorry. Aishwarya is actually speaking.
Aishwarya is talking already.
Oh, I think Harold can't hear me.
Okay, yeah.
Can you hear me now, Harold?
Yes, please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So, I think the diet part really stuck out to me because I think even in Ayurveda, we have this don't eat like till your stomach is full philosophy. And like I've been trying to go on a plant-based diet for ages. This book really convinced me what are the benefits in a different way. So, you're not alone. So yeah,
you're planning to have a long life, touch wood. Awesome.
Yeah, a healthy life. Yeah. I think Sadanand wants to go next.
Yes, sir. Sadanand, over to you.
Basically, what I understood about Ikigai was, what's your reason for getting out of bed? Simply put, fantastic. What's your reason? You've got to have some reason. And the book which I read, slightly different, How to Ikigai, it's more probably verb form. What does it mean? It basically means how do you delight the world and how do you get delighted in turn? The key word seems to be delight. There is something in your life which delights you. What is that? I mean, you got to find out that. Otherwise, many years back, maybe when I was your age, I often used to wonder, what's the purpose of my life? Why was I born? This was a basic question. There's really no answer to that, I think. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing, Sadanand. Who else would like to go? I think Sujata.
Sujata here.
Yes, Sujata, go ahead.
The concept of four circle itself, whatever he has predicted in book and the way it is developed, that itself is very touching. So Agreed. If somebody could understand those four circles and start working on it, he will find his Ikigai for sure. So
fantastic.
Yeah. I read book couple of times because I had to write one article on it, and I took one session also in our HR stream. So I could find out that the concept, if you start evolving and discussing, you will definitely find your Ikigai one day. So I would recommend everybody to concentrate on those circles and start working on it.
Super. Thank you, Sujata. Who else would like to go? Sneha?
Can I go? Yeah.
Yes, Sneha, go ahead.
Harold, thanks for the wonderful review, and glad to be a part of today's session. I think this is my first session with the book club here. And what a beautiful book to start with. So when I read Ikigai, I actually read it, actually heard it for the first time. And the setting was beautiful because I think I read it sometime around January last year, and I was walking around in a beautiful garden. So it was, kind of reinforcing the Zen quotient when I was listening to it for the first time. And for me, it was affirming a lot of concepts that, we're already aware of. Uh, you know, so the fact that, community living brings its own share of joy, the fact that eating right and eating light has so much to do with your longevity, the fact that spending time in garden, it brings you closer to nature. And in retrospect, I'm just thinking how all of this got reinforced during pandemic, because I read this book before pandemic. You talked about how you discovered the flow state while you were chopping vegetables and probably cooking, and I'm sure all of us learned and discovered the joy of being home and cooking, being with loved ones. So yeah, now when I reflect back on it, a lot of the things which were mentioned in the book um, were actually brought out and kind of reinforced during a pandemic. So yeah, that was my take on it. And personally, I like the part where of course everyone looks up to Steve Jobs as this big business icon, thinking that he would have been busy all through his life, but how he kind of got that Japanese wisdom in his designs. I think it talks about the sets of 6 cups that he had, that
Yes.
you just talked about. So that also kind of stuck with me after I read the book. And thanks again for the great review.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Sneha. And by the way, the same happened to me also. I also went into a Zen state while reading the book. There are not many books that put you in a Zen state, but this was one of them for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else would like to share? I'd really love to hear some thoughts. You've read the book, this is the time to share.
Yeah, hi. Tanmay here.
Yes, Tanmay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I think, first of all, thanks a lot for this beautiful summary, because I was thinking that I'm going through this book once again in a very nice way you have covered. My takeaway is, yes, stay active, don't retire, which something which was very predominantly, which was coming in the initial, this thing that you don't require to retire. That was there are a lot of examples which were given. How to take it things slow, which was very predominant. Walk slowly, you will go far. And also that stomach part, that 80% rule, that you should not fill your entire stomach. So I think that's something which used to be hearing from my some of my other next of keens and other people also. Wisdom was there, but yeah, this was very predominant which came. And yeah, obviously in terms of how to surround oneself with the good friends, and how the community building which can help in a long way. So yeah, it was full of there are a lot of takeaways. Honestly, it's like 15-20 takeaways I can say, but yeah, these are the predominant which I found. So thanks a lot for your session. Thank
awesome.
you.
Most welcome. Santosh, you have been uncharacteristically quiet. So
no, I'm listening what people are saying. I have certainly appreciated the book. As I mentioned in the start, no, I worked on calling as a part of my thesis, which I found it very close to the Ikigai. And I think the way Sujata has mentioned, no, I'm recently thinking on that 4 circles, and if some activity could be developed surrounding those 4 circles, so that it will help people to come up with their own Ikigai or their own calling. So that way, I really zapped with this small book. And as I told you, the book was lying with me almost for a couple of years, and I have not read it. And then we selected it as a part of our book club, and then I read it. And then again I'm planning to review this this month, because it will add to my understanding of calling also. So I also request others also, I mean, if you are reading the book and if you something strikes you that something could be developed, or some another book need to be read to know which is really good. For example, this book talks about flow, which I have read long back, or it talks about the Morita therapy. Morita therapy I have not read. But the next book of the month, which is Meaning by Viktor Frankl, that also I have read. But again, when you read these books in tandem with the another book, it gives a totally different meaning, different perspective to the life, and our reading itself, enriches. So that way also, if you come across something like this when you are reading, you should share in the our group also, no? And add in our review meetings also. Thank you. Thank you. We
Thanks.
have Amit, Dhananjay, Nidhi. They can also add something.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to Dhananjay. Hi. I think you joined while we.
Yes, I joined a little bit late. Sorry for that, but I started actually attended the review from beginning.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I have not read the book. This is one of our my reading list. But looks like after this review that I need to jump this book to the next priority. Real nice review.
Thank you.
In fact, I read a lot of articles on Ikigai, but obviously
you can
now
share something that you struck you about Ikigai from there, if you remember it.
So there is actually one slide. I can't remember the details of it. There is one slide which there is a mapping of this Ikigai principle versus our current working principle. Okay. So that actually struck me, like why we are working, what is the purpose, what's your core philosophy of what are the job you're doing. Okay, so that I think that has really actually triggered me. I mean, that was a point I think triggered me of this book as well as this word. Okay, so obviously it's very nice review, Herald, and definitely this is going to be. I'm going to read this very soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and you're right. That visual, I think, it's the power of, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So this is like, this picture is worth, I don't know, maybe more than 1,000, It encapsulates, it encapsulates the intersection of those concepts so beautifully.
Yes.
And I think if you don't take anything away, but you just take away that diagram, that is enough.
Yeah. No, that was, see, this diagram came to me during one of the presentation, and the first time it offers that, like, this has really forced me to really think about a lot of things about life and what you're doing it. It really happens. Most of times those diagrams come as a motivational or some kind of thought provoking, but this really actually get into details like why we are doing and what you really want to achieve.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dhananjay. Nidhi, over to you.
Yes. Hi, Harold. Thank you so much for such a wonderful book review. And I love this. I love your session. When I read, okay, Harold's going to review this book, so I thought, no, let me join. I'm not going to miss this session. I'm going to attend the session. So my takeaway from this book, actually, I've not read this book, but I heard audiobook from Audible. So the few takeaway, like for example, accept your feelings and do not try to chase perfections, and always talk to your loved one, because we always take our people so granted, and focus on the work instead of in a result. And like it's rightly mentioned by Santosh, like monitor therapy.
Awesome. Wow, that's a lot.
So these are the few takeaways. And yes, and replace junk food with your fruits. So yeah. So thank you so much once again for such a wonderful book review. Thank you. And I would love to read this book, because I have listened this book, but now I'm going to, after your review, I'm going to buy this book and going to read this book. So thank you so much.
I believe it will be worth absolutely. So is there anybody else who would like to share, or I'll just give my last slide and wind up?
Hey, Alex, this is Amit.
Hey, Amit, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, sorry I joined late. I missed.
No, not at all.
We regret this. But I did, meaning as Nidhi mentioned, I also just listened to this book, and while listening, one of the things I'll just touch on just one thing was the multitasking part and how we operate in the corporate world. And I was speaking, and I'm speaking in reference to this lady. I forgot the entire premise actually, but there was this lady in Japan, and she was tucked away at some remote part of the office, and the guys who were going to go and interview her had to go through another building and meet her and see her at work. And this, when I draw parallels with the world today, in the corporate world at least that I am part of, if there is a person who's actually working well, the tendency is that put that person in front of the customer and make sure that they talk about their work. And over a period of time, the work becomes around 20-30%, and their customer facing things increase, and it goes from 0 to maybe 70-80%. So that's a contrast that I saw, and you know, the distractions that there are, you know, and how it dilutes us achieving those flow moments and things like that. So yeah, you know, that was a takeaway for me, you know, and I'm a manager, so I also am guilty of you know, putting our best folks who actually need to be working on something good, and diluting their efforts and work by just putting them in front of the customer every time that to show the best face and so on. So that's a small part, and in that same I think flow, there was this mention of the elevator lady. So I think you had covered this in your listening. So yeah, that's something that stuck with me. I read this a while ago, but that stuck with me.
Thanks. Awesome. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So they, in that story, they describe a woman who's in a factory that is manufacturing paint brushes, you know, and how there's one person who picks those bristles. Each bristle she hand picks and puts into those brushes. And apparently the quality of those brushes is like some insanely high. But yeah, hit the nail on the head. And I'm surprised that you remember those stories. Obviously, they had a huge impact. Thanks for sharing.
They had, yes.
Thank you. For sharing also. Anyone else? This would be a good time for you to share. If you've read the book, or even if you heard of the concept.
I use fountain pen. I know very few people use fountain pen today, but no, I read in another article about firms in Japan who makes fountain pens, and the artistry that goes into making those fountain pens. And if you just simply look at the way they pack it and they sell it, it's I mean, it's wonderful to see how in a very mundane and simple object they put all their artistry to or they make good part of it. How this is reflected in corporate also, it's very interesting. For example, when I was in Japan, I had a chance to listen to the head of Dyson. Dyson is a vacuum cleaner firm. So they say it is an UK-based firm, and when they decided to move out of UK, I mean expand out of UK, the first country they choose to enter was Japan. And why they said in Japan? Because they said if their quality is accepted in Japan, it will be accepted everywhere in the world. And Dyson became a #1 brand, a vacuum cleaner brand in Japan. And you really need to see, how they have designed each and every component of that. So I really, I mean, this part, of embedding, work, of having very high work ethic, I think is embedded into the psyche of Japanese people.
Yes, yes. And also in Zen, part of the philosophy. They're born
part of their philosophy.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Santosh.
Yeah.
So just 1 minute. I'm not going to say anything. I would like you to digest what's written here. The 10 rules of Ikigai according to this book. And then the famous diagram to find your Ikigai, which is the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. So the thing I like about this diagram, it's not something theoretical that you sit in the Himalayas or mountains.
Yes, Nidhi, yes. Harold will post his recording and we'll share the link.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Next book of the month is Viktor Frankl's book. So we'll be reading. So that that will be also this month's book is Start With Why, which Aishwarya is going to review, and the next book of the month. So the February's book of month is Viktor Frankl's book. So we have not yet decided who is going to review that, but someone will volunteer for that. And if you wish to get, mostly I think today we are members only, but if anyone wish to join our book club, there is no formality, nothing. You have to just send me your number and we'll add you. We talk a lot of things about the books on the book club, so you can join. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Santosh, Harold was summarizing the book. I think you should allow him for a minute before closing.
Yeah. Yes,
no,
yes.
In fact, I just wanted that slide to do the work, talking, in fact. So
right. So
yeah.
I thought you were talking as well, so better to complete
I'm
that.
done. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to present that slide. That's all. Over to you, Santosh. That's it.
Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm also done.
Awesome.
I pursued that you are done, so I started. I thought.
Yeah, I know. That's right. That's why I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted the book to speak for itself at some level.